Welcome to the Leaderish Podcast with your hosts, Regina and Doris. Hey, Doris. How's it going?
Hey, Regina. It's going very well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I've had a good week so far. We're recording a little earlier than we normally do. My son actually joined the Cub Scouts, so we did a duck derby. He did not win, but it sure was fun.
What is a what derby?
Oh, a duck derby. So we have creeks all around us.
Hmm.
Our creek is Mill Creek, and they take a yellow bathtub duck and they decorate them and then they race them down the creek. What was so fun is that our creek has like no water in it right now. And so they had to use leaf blowers to blow the ducks to the finish line. It was fabulous.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so much fun. I hope you took videos because I think I need to see some of those videos of ducks being blown aggressively down the creek, sounds like.
Yeah, I will definitely share those with you. How are things going with you?
Oh, they're going very well. I am the presentation that we talked about last week. I'm doing that presentation again in Kansas City on Thursday. So I'm getting ready to travel. I'm very excited about that. And life's going pretty well right now.
All right, and you're checked in for your flight. So
I am
all
checked into
good.
my flight. Yes, thank you.
I love it. Well, today we have a special guest with us. We have Adam Malone with us, who I had the pleasure of working with for years at a previous company. Adam, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Today is my wife's birthday. So that's what we've been celebrating at the Malone home.
Oh, how much
Mhm.
fun. Are you going to do something special with her this evening?
Well, just before this, I took her out for a quick lunch right by the house. So that was our little like celebration. And with five kids, getting lunch, just the two of us, with no one needing food cut up or, you know, other things to be done. It was very peaceful. We talked some and we sat in silence some. It was delightful.
Oh, it sounds delightful. I only have two kids, so I can't even imagine when you more than double that number. That's fabulous. Well, happy birthday, Crystal.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
All right. Well, Adam, one of the things that we like to do is we like to start off with sharing what we have in our cups. So I'm going to start with you. Adam, what's in your
Okay.
cup?
I am drinking decaf coffee from my lovely Grand Canyon cup. I wish it could be caffeinated, but alas, I'm becoming an old man. It's afternoon, so we're past that point in our day.
I love it. I used to drink like 8 cups of coffee. I've recently gone down to two and I'm done by 10. So I'm feeling real good about my life. I hope you're feeling
Hmm.
good about yours.
I feel good, but the flavor, like the availability of a broad spectrum of roasting types is not really something you get in decaf coffee. You just try to get one that's fine,
Yeah,
as opposed to, man, this is a good cup of coffee. So it's just what you're dealing with.
I hear you. I hear you. Doris, what do you have in your cup?
I have tea. I have in my Chicago mug. We bought these mugs on one of our fun trips to Chicago. It is sweet tangerine positive energy tea. It does have a tiny bit of caffeine in it, but I thought we are going to have this most wonderful podcast and it will be even more elevated through positive energy tea
And a
Wow.
little caffeine.
and a little caffeine.
That's a crazy name for a cup of tea. I just want you like that's a lot like someone committed to their naming when they decided to name their tea something. Oh, the yogi people. Yeah, they like their names.
Yeah, last week's was incredible. I can't even repeat it,
I,
but there were
I,
words repeated that I'd never heard. It was crazy.
and what is in your cup, Regina?
Okay, still boring old bubble water. It's the blackberry because I'm on a blackberry kick right now. So just blackberry bubble water.
So, Regina, what are we talking about today?
Well, let's go back a few episodes to get to this episode. So, a couple episodes ago, we talked about values and we really focused on personal values and kind of what feeds us. Then you brought an amazing topic around communication and empowering your communication. I think we called it the 4 keys to effective communication. And if
Mhm.
we tie those together when we think about a leader and leading teams, we have invited Adam to talk about guiding principles and to focus on what are guiding principles, why do we do them, how do you as a leader create guiding principles for your team or organization, and how do you leverage those? So I'm really excited about today's topic. I've seen Adam's guiding principles in action in a team and corporate environment. So I'm excited to get started. Adam, how would you define guiding principles?
So the first thing I would say is guiding principles are what you're trying to achieve and the ways that you're going to guide, sorry to use the word in the definition, how you're going to guide the decisions you make for what you're trying to deliver for whoever your customer is. And so an example of that could be a guiding principle of we have to maintain the lowest cost possible. So if you give your team that sort of guiding principle for their decisions and it's number one, that really helps them weed through a lot of options that they would be considering that don't adhere to that cost goal. Whereas if you had a guiding principle of like timeliness of delivery or quality, you might make different choices. And so really you're building a set of principles, ideally a few of them, to help the team make relatively complex decisions whenever you're trying to deliver something to a customer.
What I love about that, it is the confluence of values and communication for decision making. This is why this is such a great topic today for us, because what you're doing is you're setting a framework for that decision making. You're communicating out that framework so that your team feels empowered to make decisions.
A big part of that empowerment goal, that's one of my preferred words when talking about the teams I lead, is too often we tell teams they're empowered and they go off and do work. And then when they come back, we're not happy with the work. And we find out that that's because they weren't given enough information ahead of time. And then when they made a decision, we change it. And so then they don't feel empowered because their decisions gets changed after they make them. And the guiding principles focus is to spend time up front. It's the investment thing. Got to spend time up front to reap better gains and rewards at the end, not kind of be surprised by disappointment.
It's kind of that go slow to go fast mentality. If you spend the time up front creating that framework for your team, then they can move faster after they have that framework and will feel more supported and empowered. It's so often that as leaders, we give a directive or we assign a project, but we don't set clear parameters for that project or that assignment. And so then they are left to fill in the gaps and make decisions without that framework. So it seems like guiding principles would really help in those situations.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that seems really, really smart. I do have a question for you. When we talked about the 4 keys of effective communication or powerful communication, one of the things I talked about was the why behind all communication.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrapped it around Simon Sinek's book. It starts with why. So organizations have a very powerful, or successful organizations have a powerful why.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk about it in a more granular level, that every communication should have a why. How would you differentiate guiding principles versus a why?
I think of the why as the higher level. It's a higher level decision or thinking than guiding principles. So
Mhm.
I think Doris, when you and I were talking one time, you kind of talked about the why, the what, and the how. And I kind of think of guiding principles fitting in that what category. So the why, often it's going to be a little bit loftier sort of goal that you're trying to achieve. The what is going to be a bit more of um, the rules of the road for how we're going to get our work done. And then you have the how, and that's going to be the tactical delivery questions of, you know, what are we going to use or employ in order to kind of walk back up through the what and then back up to the why to meet the customer need? Does that help?
Yes, and I love that we go back up to the why. So we never lose sight of the why. That is always important as we're trying to figure out all of the other W's and the H.
Yeah, exactly.
What success have you seen with teams when you are working with a clear guiding principles framework?
The first success, and I'll just say this more generally, is the more you can give your team guiding principles, the more consistently you're going to get great work.
Mm.
And so that applies for, say, my direct team, the people who on an org chart, they have lines that come up to me and they report to me, right? That's my direct team. But also as a broader leader, we're all part of cross-functional teams. And so I view it as you need to set guiding principles for your team, your direct team. But then also when you are on a large cross-functional team and you're either the executive sponsor or you're one of a few higher level leaders in that group, really pushing that team, that cross-functional team, to align on the guiding principles will really save a lot of conflict and argument when you start trying to deliver and get to the how, because your team can't effectively debate how and what simultaneously. And often we do that. And when we debate how and what simultaneously, it's really inefficient because they're two separate problems. And so getting strong guiding principles in with the team at the beginning that everyone agrees to and all the leaders agree to, it's almost like you're 70% pre-agreed to the solution. Because as long as the solution meets those guiding principles, for the most part, the leaders on the call are going to be like, yep, you met all of our goals and our targets and our principles, and we like the way you're solving it. This is fantastic. As opposed to what often happens, teams work for months. They then come and engage a leadership group and say, hey, here's the fantastic solution we have. And then we're like, well, that doesn't hit all the things we need to hit. That doesn't deliver everything we need to deliver. And then we kind of have to disappoint the team by saying no or tell them to go back to the drawing board. And then they all go after the leader shut the door and they're like, what in the world? These guys do this every time. We worked and worked and worked. And then they pulled the rug out from under us. And then it creates conflict, not only within that team, but like between the leadership group and the working group.
Do you have any examples of when guiding principles weren't used and it didn't work, and when guiding principles were used and it did work?
Yeah. I'll give an example. It's pretty tactical, and Regina will be familiar with some of these things. In our prior work, did a lot of work with planning for demand for needs of cell phones and cell phone accessories. At one point, I asked a cross-functional group of leaders to go off and build a strategy for how we wanted to handle accessory purchases. I made the mistake of not encouraging that team to develop guiding principles and work with the leaders first. They went off, they worked for a few months, really about a month. They came back and presented it to me and one of my peers, VPs at the time, and it was a hot mess. They weren't clear on what they were trying to achieve. Multiple of the things that they recommended were actually kind of in conflict with some like business principles that we had at the time. They developed a strategy in some ways, but it wasn't ticking all the boxes we needed to tick for it to be successful. I kind of took that on the chin, said, hey, I think this is my fault. I didn't give you guys enough to work with. And so this is the frustrating thing. Literally, we spent 15 minutes with a couple folks after that call to align on the principles that we want to use to make these decisions. The team went off, kind of respun the work 2 weeks later, and it was fantastic. The strategy saved a couple $1 million. It led to some initiative savings that were fantastic. And then we built a quarterly refresh cycle where we looked at that strategy every quarter. And the first step that we agreed to is, hey, we pull everyone together and we agree on the guiding principles for how we're approaching this strategy. And that includes the VPs who are going to review it, all the way down to like the managers who are doing, a ton of the work. Often that's a 15-minute meeting. And then the teams go off and do their work, and then we're done. And it works really well. But by giving everyone an opportunity to revisit the guiding principles every quarter, people don't feel like they've made a decision that has to like last for eternity. No, we're going to revisit these next quarter. Things could have changed. And then the team gets really clear guidance every time. And so that has gone from an ordeal that had mediocre to poor results and took a long time to an endeavor that gets refreshed every quarter. And it takes, 2 days to update it and not a ton of time. And we get alignment and agreement, and we save money as a result. So it's great.
That is so smart.
I love the accountability in the story you shared. Thank you for sharing that. Sometimes it's hard to share when we mess up, but I love the accountability there and the ownership to, hey, like, obviously I didn't do my job if you guys can't get there, right? Like, this is on me. Let's work through this, and then creating those clear guiding principles with the team, not alone. That's what I heard.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't write them down and say, here are your guiding principles. Instead, you worked together. And then the other thing that I loved about your example is you kept reminding them. Lencioni had mentioned this, I think, in another episode, calls it the chief reminding officer. And so our job as leaders is to continue to remind people of those principles, the why, the where we're going, and how important it is for them to play on this team. A few really good key points there. Thank you for sharing that example with us.
Happy to.
Yeah, super smart. I love that. I also would agree with you, Regina, that reminding it reminds me of a corporation's values and their culture as well. The leaders need to continue to remind their teams of those high level cultural norms and values of an organization.
So we've really dug into why we do this and some benefits there. You've shared an amazing story. I think my next question for you is, how do we do this? I think you gave us a little taste. You got to get folks involved, but could you share a little bit more into how you create guiding principles?
Sure. And I want to talk a little bit about how you do it for your direct team. Because often I think cross-functional projects, that's more like aligning on goals. And we kind of like often we know how to do that a little bit. We don't frequently have the good hygiene to do it well, but we kind of know, we should have goals and we should agree on them. But when we're leading our teams, sometimes you're just like, it's my team. We'll do the work and it'll be great and we'll produce. And I think lots of leaders would benefit if they would really take a moment and write down the guiding principles for how their team does their work. And I have a couple rules. One is they need to be unique. So lots of organizations or whatever have rules, have guiding principles. They're like, we drive results. It's like, well, no organization in the planet doesn't want to drive results. So like, why are you wasting, ink and space in people's brain with your first principle or value is we drive results? Of course, duh. And so make them unique. They should describe things specific to your team or your organization. Second, you should have as small a number of them as possible, because you're going to ask your people to keep these in their brain and then to use them openly in their everyday work. And so while I think Amazon has some great leadership principles and guiding principles, we might talk about some of those, they have some good examples. They also have 19 of them, which means that literally no one can remember all of them unless they like have flashcards and someone who does like a memory quiz, right? So unique, a small number, and they can't be complex. Like you need to be able to kind of explain them in relatively simple terms. I'm going to use an example that kind of flies in the face a little bit of this last one, because some people might not think it's a simple term, but I'll kind of explain. So once upon a time, I built a team that did performance management at the company I was at. It was called Channel. Really, most people don't know what Channel is, so we call it performance. That work involves a ton of analysis. It's about how do we make good, high quality decisions about how to drive margin in our business. So it's a bunch of Excel nerds. We all kind of love Excel and we love debating, math terms and that sort of thing. But we created a rule about the type of analysis that the team did. And so most humans think in terms of averages. It's the easiest way we think. We think about averages, and when we make decisions, usually people make decisions based on averages. But everything that this team did was based on we're making a decision about a marginal increase in what we're going to do. And so we made it a guiding principle for that team's work that all of the math had to be done on marginal benefit and marginal cost. For the non-math nerds on the team, what that means is if adding 10 more units of production costs $100 and it has $200 of benefit, we use those marginal values for just that set of 10, as opposed to using the averages. And the reason is because when you make decisions in business to make a decision to add something, well, you're not adding the average because the average doesn't exist. Like that's not a real thing. So we have to do the math in a way that makes better decisions. And so you might say, well, Adam, like that flies in the face of the simplicity goal. Well, the goal here is that the team has to be able to explain them to themselves, not necessarily to everyone in the world.
Well, you said three things. You said that they need to be unique.
Yep.
You need to have just a few, and they need to be simple.
Yes.
And so I think the unique helps it stick in their brain, and so does the simple. And the just a few helps it to be easier to remember so they can pull it back up at every decision, as opposed to pulling up a 62-page deck, trying to figure out, does this decision meet all of our guiding principles?
Yeah. An example of a small number that are very memorable. Early in my leadership career, I had a team of a couple analysts that reported directly to me. And my rule was you can't send any information to anyone without asking why. Because you'd have VPs or senior directors who'd walk up to your queue and be like, hey, can you send me blah, 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 blah. And so like, sure. And you send them that, and then they go and do things with it because that's what, VPs do. And so often the person asking the question doesn't know enough about the work that has to be done to ask a really good one. So you do it the way you think it should be done, and then they go use it how they think it should be used. And there's often this chasm between the two that leads to like inappropriate decisions or the wrong thing communicated. And so it was a really simple rule of like, hey, if someone comes to you and says, I need X, Y, and Z, your response is, yes, I'd love to help you. By the way, that was one of the guiding principles also. We say, yes, we help people. But you have to ask them why, what it's going to be used for, and who it's going to go to. And the reason for all of those is because each of those flavors helps inform you, the analyst, about potential problems that could come up with your work. Because hey, I look at things from this perspective. Jim said he's going to send it to the marketing VP. I know the analysts over in marketing, they look at that data differently. So I need to help bridge the gap for him and say, hey, when you send this to marketing VP number 3, this is going to be one of his questions. I want you to know that before you share this data and this information. And so, like I said, just a small number. Like when I was leading that team of analysts, it was if someone asks for help, you say yes. Your first response is always yes. Your second response is why and where is it going? What are you going to use it for? And then your third is you ask for feedback, because if you don't, you might not get it.
That is really, really smart. I know you have some blogs or dispatches, and I read through them, and one of them, it was number 4, you used words, these 2 words together. One happens to be my favorite, curiosity, but responsible curiosity.
Yeah.
And this sounds like it hits home in a really right way. You're asking why, because people don't always ask the right question. And responsible curiosity means that you're trying to ask a question behind the question. So after you say, yes, I will get you this information, and you ask why, you might even have to dig deeper than that. You might have to ask why 2 or 3 times in order to get the question that they're really trying to ask.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really smart.
Thank you for the plug for my newsletter. That's the tenaciousoperator.com if anyone's interested in reading those.
And it'll be in the show notes.
Oh, good. One comment on the responsible curiosity thing, that's especially my urge to leaders, is that when you have I heard a professor refer to it as wine and midnight wanderings. When you're up sipping a glass of wine on your back deck and you think, I should ask this question, and you send it out. And, to date me, he referenced you typing it on a BlackBerry as opposed to an iPhone. When you send it out and then you forget that that email was ever sent. And then 3 days later, someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, Adam, you sent this question out 3 days ago and I've spent 20 hours working on it." That's an example of like irresponsible curiosity, is when you aren't bridling yourself as a leader
Mm-hmm.
so that you aren't just curious, but you kind of like put a bunch of burden on the team because you are curious in a way that drives work that doesn't always drive value or benefit for the team. And it's really easy to do that when you're someone who asks a lot of questions. So be responsibly curious, people.
That takes a lot of self-awareness
Yes.
to be able to do that. I worked with a leader and I could always tell when he was stressed because he would go like so minute into details that was his derailer, right? You could tell when he was in a state of stress, all the detail digging. And I'm like, why are we doing this? Like, all these details have nothing to do with where we need to go. Let's pull up. And it took me a while to realize that when that happened, it was a stress indicator for him. So having that self-awareness to know what is responsibly curious
Mm.
and what is irresponsibly curious and what is going to create more of a storm within your team. And the reason that we're talking about guiding principles is to keep those even waters, right? So making sure you're self-aware enough to know when you're creating a storm or swirl, as we used to call it, and using those guiding principles to keep that even flow of work going and decision making.
Regina, let me ask you, I assume that leader did not have guiding principles.
No, I think that there were guiding principles there. Yeah, it was a stress indicator. It was not you, Adam, although
Okay.
you have been there before. Actually, yeah. I mean, I think we all do something. We all have a tell when we are under stress and pressure, and guiding principles can really bring us back down to earth, especially when our team reminds us of our guiding principles. And that's when you know you have become the chief reminding officer, when your team can say, remember, we always say yes. That's our first guiding principle. And you're like, yep, we do. We always say yes. And that brings you back down into where you need to go. Now, that requires safety and trust on your team, right? So those guiding principles can also do that. They can create that safety and that trust to challenge each other in a responsible, to use the word again, in a responsible way.
Yeah.
Let me ask this question then. So when you saw this tell and this person maybe was going a little bit away or awry of his guiding principles, were you able to bring him back to those guiding principles? Or what would have been a good way to remind him to come back to those guiding principles?
Oh, that's a great question. Luckily, I had quite a bit of trust with this leader. And I would simply say, hey, Fred, you're really going into details right now. Usually that tells me that you're under a lot of stress and pressure. What's happening for you right now? And that would be the trigger to go, oh, yeah, I don't need to be in this level of detail. Here's what's happening. Here's what's going on. Let's get back to the big picture.
Mm-hmm. You used an important word there, trust. You have to have that trusting relationship. And even before trust, you have to have a good relationship. And then you build trust on that relationship. But I think having strong relationships will help you be able to communicate properly and remind each other of the guiding principles that have been set for the team and the cross-functional team.
Yeah. So Adam, back to the how.
Yeah.
Do we have like a step-by-step framework that we can offer to our listeners on how to get guiding principles into your team?
Yep.
How to create them?
Yeah. So the first we kind of hinted at, and that's you need to focus on what makes your team's work specific, valuable, and unique. You don't want these to be bland. You don't want them to apply to every team necessarily. Make them personal enough and close enough to the team's work that they want to embrace them. That's an example of when I just said I had this kind of nerdy team that we said, well, we do marginal math, we don't do average math. It told them how they did their work, but it also gave them a platform for when someone said, well, why didn't you do it this way? They said, oh, that's not how we do our work. We do it this way. And they were kind of empowered to kind of broadcast that and tell them that. And then the next piece would be defining what it means to use that principle and then use it. So you actually have to, when you share this guiding principle, or your team ideally agrees that this should be a guiding principle, as you bring people into the team, it's important that you make certain that they know what those principles are. And then as soon as possible, you have them doing work that has them leverage that idea and that principle, and that you're drawing the line for them. Hey, like in this case, if we had done the math this way, this is the answer we would have gotten. Because we do it this way, this is the answer we give. That's how you can see that doing these things is different. It's not just lip service, that we have some target or some goal. No, the way we do our work is important. And that's why we define how we are going to do it.
I love going back to the guiding principles as people are learning them and explaining them and reiterating the importance and the difference.
And then the last thing is, I would say, try to make it memorable, right? This is about simplicity. You want people to know them. If it takes you 5 paragraphs or 10 PowerPoint slides to kind of get this in someone's brain, that probably means it's not a good guiding principle. It's too complex. And if the team can't remember it, then they can't use it. And so you shouldn't have it. It's a waste of space and time if you're training people with things that they can't actually use. And so simplicity is key.
I remember creating my first set of guiding principles, and it was a slide with 10 bullet points, like really long sentences. It was overdone, and it was for kind of a cross-functional group. And I was trying to get everyone's thoughts into our principles instead of simplifying. And actually, I have to admit, I didn't even use them, because even though I had worked on them and I had written them, they were unusable because they were so complex.
What would you say is the maximum number, if there is a maximum number or a right number of guiding principles?
That's a fantastic question. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule. I would differentiate again between things I'm trying to create in a culture for my direct team and things that I'm trying to make as part of a cross-functional team's, work product as a part of a project.
Mm-hmm.
For your team, when you're building culture, fewer is super key, because you can't build culture around 15 different things, in my opinion. I would be between 3 and 5. And really on my teams, I don't know if we ever even had 5. It may have always been less than that. For a project team, I think that can be a little bit different, because you may have a project that one is relatively complex and you need like specific goals that are related to the outcome of this specific work that's being done. So you may need to have some relatively specific guiding principles about, hey, we have to achieve X. This is the most important of our goals, blah, 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 as opposed to for your direct team, you're talking more about creating culture and a broader sense of how we do our work. Mm-hmm. So you might not need like the same level of specificity. Oh, one thing I will say, Doris, on that question though, is Regina kind of hinted at this. My other rule for people is if you're going to present to a group about what you think guiding principles should be, you should always have less than you think you're going to end up with, because every time you present it to a group that thinks they have decision rights, they will add to them.
Yes, that's what happened.
Yeah.
Thank you. That just brought clarity to me too on what happened with those. Yeah.
I would say, hey, take in 3 or 4. You know the VPs are going to add one because like the VPs aren't going to feel like they did a good job if they just say yes. So they're going to have to add one. And then you can, walk away with, 5 or something like that. But if you go into a room with 7, they're like, oh, we need 9. And they're going to, add 2, not just 1. And then you're like, oh, crap, we're at 9.
No one's going to remember that.
No, not at all.
No.
That's right. Well, Adam, let's give you the final word. Anything that we didn't cover today that you were hoping to cover on guiding principles?
The other kind of one thing that we didn't talk about is, and I should have said this, is trying to make certain that you keep your guiding principles close. And I don't mean close like, oh, we hold these dear and we always talk about them. You should definitely do that. Like that's part of what they are. But you should keep them close in that I think lots of people are unable to really use guiding principles in their work day to day because they're written or conducted at a level that is so far away that the team member doesn't feel like they can contribute to them. One of the great powerful benefits of making these things for yourself or for your team is that you can make them about the work you do every day and guiding the work that's done every day, as opposed to every company has some set of guiding principles that's 4 to 6 things that can apply to the entire company. And sometimes those things feel so far away that I don't feel like as an individual team member that I can reach out and touch them and impact them. And so the guiding principle is kind of like, it's almost like ethereal. It's like some lofty goal that I'll never be able to touch or impact. And if you want people to be able to feel empowered and like they can drive change, they have to feel like that's close enough that they can grasp it. And so keeping those principles close and within arm's reach of the person and what they do will help them take hold of them and actually leverage them in their work, as opposed to like, oh yeah, company X, yeah, that's one of our guiding principles. I don't really know what it means. I don't talk to customers, so it doesn't impact me because it's a customer success goal. They kind of go along their way.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Well, thank you for that. Doris, what are a few things that our listeners could take and start applying from this discussion today?
Regina, there were so many good things. It's hard to choose, but I've been making notes and I circled a few things. I think the first is those 3 steps on how to create. 1, they have to be unique. 2, they have to be small in number. And 3, not complex. And I'm using not complex rather than simple, because I think there is a slight difference. We don't want to simplify it so to a degree where it gets ignored, but it can't be complex. It has to be not complex. The other thing is, I love the phrase average doesn't exist. I'm not sure that I've ever heard that before, but it makes so much sense that we put things into averages so that we can kind of grasp an understanding of them. But at the end of the day, that number may not exist at all. And I think that's a really good point. And the third one is that last point that you just brought up, is keeping these guiding principles close or making them impactful for everyone in the organization or on a particular team, so that they're not so lofty that I, as an individual contributor, cannot feel like I can make a difference using those guiding principles.
That's great. Those are some really good takeaways from our discussion today. So, Doris, I know that often you fill your cup with microbursts of re-energy. What are you going to do this week to fill your cup?
I have something a little more fun this weekend.
Yes.
My husband and I are going to go to Pilgrimage, which is in Franklin, Tennessee. It's a festival, a music festival. And one of the acts is Dave Matthews. And I have probably too long of a Dave Matthews story to share here today, but I'm super excited that my husband and I can watch Dave Matthews together. And that is how I'm going to fill my cup this weekend. How about you, Regina?
Well, you totally stole my thunder. And I had no idea you were going to be there. So I'm super excited to see you as well. My bestie and I planned this like 6 months ago. My parents actually live right across the street from the venue. Just a girls' weekend. We're going to stay at my parents' house, walk over to the venue, walk back, have a great time. on Saturday and Sunday. So I'm super excited to do that. So we'll both be filling our cup in the same way, and I'll see you, and we'll have some drinks and
Absolutely.
have some real drinks, not
Yeah.
tea and bubble water,
No.
and enjoy some great live music together. Adam, what are you doing to fill your cup?
Thursday, I'm getting on a plane. I'm heading to Dallas for the weekend. Part of what
Ooh.
I do, in addition to working with leaders and leadership consulting, is I also do public speaking. And I'm going to a speaker camp, for lack of a better term, to help hone my craft a little bit on delivering keynotes and workshops.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. So I lived in Dallas for 5 years.
Oh, nice.
I have an amazing network. We have tons of people in Dallas who listen to our podcast. So if you're listening, look up Adam.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I didn't mention that I'm in a Toastmasters contest on Saturday
Oh,
before pilgrimage. I'm competing in a humorous speech contest.
Oh my word. This is fabulous.
can we get the YouTube link for that when it's out, Doris?
Please.
Well, maybe I will record it. I hadn't thought about that, but maybe I need to record it.
Yes, you should. And we could even play snippets on the podcast. That would be so much fun.
Well, maybe we will do that on a future episode.
All right. Well, folks, that is about it for this episode on guiding principles. We would love to talk to you. All of our links can be found in the show notes. You can find more information about Doris, Regina, and Adam. Follow us on this journey as we delve into all things leadership. We would love a review. So if you would take a moment and leave a 5-star review and a comment, we would appreciate that. If you're interested on being a guest and have an engaging topic, please reach out to leaderishpodcast@gmail.com with your desired topics and some information on how we can stalk you, and we'll follow up. All right, guys, cheers.